Hello there. Welcome into a Thursday edition of the show. So glad to have you, whether you're listening on your radio, online at extrasports1300.com, or you've downloaded the widely available and 100% free Extra Sports 1300 app. A veritable cornucopia of sports topics coming your way over the course of the next 3 hours, and I'd love to get your thoughts on all of them. The text line and the phone line has the same number for your convenience. 719-247-1313. A lot of hoops today, but we will, as we normally do, span the entire sports world. And let's start with hoops. It's happening. Finally, at long last. Well, not quite yet. It's not quite at it's like at the 1 yard line. Two mixed metaphors. Multiple reports that the LA Clippers have traded Russell Westbrook to the Utah Jazz. And the Jazz will then buy out Russell Westbrook, clearing the path, in Woj's words, to Russell Westbrook signing with the Denver Nuggets. It's not a done deal yet, but the trade to Utah is. That's the first step. Then he gets bought out. Then he signs with the Denver Nuggets. And I got to say, I'm a little bit worried about this whole thing. Because just in a vacuum, Russell Westbrook is better than Reggie Jackson. The Nuggets have upgraded the discarded Clippers point guards on their roster. They have gone from Reggie Jackson to Russell Westbrook. That is an upgrade. But I worry that the amount of time it has taken for all of this to materialize has caused kind of a bit of a frenzy around Russell Westbrook. Right? When you're told, and I don't know who the they is, life coaches, self-help gurus, they say that you should not say that something is happening if you don't know that it's not, right? You don't want to get people's hopes up only to disappoint them. I think because it has been so known that Russell Westbrook was going to end up in Denver, that the anticipation of such a move has built and built and built and built and built. And I feel like the discourse around this acquisition is maybe teetering on getting out of control. Russell Westbrook is better than Reggie Jackson. That is a fact. Therefore, that spot in the Nuggets bench is better than it was last year. Dario Saric is better than DeAndre Jordan. Julian Strawther looks very good in Las Vegas. And you take these things and combine them, even with the loss of Deron Holmes, and you can reasonably say that the Denver Nuggets bench is better than it was a year ago. But Russell Westbrook will not make the difference between the Denver Nuggets going back to the NBA Finals and then falling short again. I promise you, Russell Westbrook will not make that difference on this basketball team. Nor will Dario Saric, nor will Julian Strawther. The bench unit of the Denver Nuggets is not going to be the separator. I understand it was one of the Nuggets' issues. It was not the biggest issue. Okay? You could take that exact bench that they had last year with a 100% Jamal Murray, with Jamal Murray right, and they very well could have been in the NBA Finals again. The Nuggets bench on paper is better than the one they had last year. And that is a good thing. You have to improve where you can. And what Calvin Booth is doing is similar to what Chris McFarland did for the Avalanche. Right? And the Avs lost a bigger piece after they won a Stanley Cup, right? They lost Nazem Kadri, and it took them a couple of years to try and find adequate replacements for him. But they didn't outright replace him 1-for-1. What they did was they said they brought in a guy for the third line and a guy for the second line and relied on internal improvement. And what they said, or what they were thinking, was that, yes, we didn't bring in anybody that is the same as Nazem Kadri. But with the other improvements we have made, take our team from top to bottom, we can be close to as productive as we were in our Stanley Cup year. The Nuggets are making the same bet. They lose Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. They bring in Russell Westbrook. They bring in Dario Saric. Little internal improvement. And that's what they're betting on. But the most important thing is Christian Braun stepping into Kentavious Caldwell-Pope's role. The second most important thing is Peyton Watson being reliable enough on the offensive end of the floor. And really with he and Christian Braun, this is the case. If those two don't take a step up in their roles, Russell Westbrook's not going to make a lick of difference. Okay? You got to keep the main thing the main thing. Christian Braun, if he doesn't adequately replace Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, the Denver Nuggets are not going to go to the NBA Finals. To a lesser degree, if Peyton Watson can't be trusted enough to play in every playoff series, not just the right playoff series, right? He wasn't in the rotation for the Minnesota series. If Michael Malone can't rely on him throughout the playoffs, the Nuggets will not go to the NBA Finals. And then probably the even bigger things are if Jamal Murray's not right. That's kind of where it starts. Jamal Murray's got to be right. And then if he's right, then Christian Braun needs to step in for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, and you go down and down and down and down. And then you get to, hey, the bench unit is better. I like the move getting Russell Westbrook. I do. I like it. But we found this out with the Colorado Avalanche, is that it maybe your hand is forced a bit, right? A lot of this stuff is being forced upon them by the league's new second apron. And the Cronkies' unwillingness to spend over the second luxury tax apron. Or Calvin Booth's unwillingness to hamstring himself in terms of roster flexibility. Whatever it might be. We don't know for sure, but I think it's probably a combination of both. But what they're trying to do is what the Avalanche have tried to do after their Stanley Cup run. Your best guys got to be your best guys. And then there's another problem with this, because if you look at the Avalanche, I don't know that they really had a major weakness in this year's postseason. Maybe some inexperience with Casey Middlestat, who now is their second line center. Valeri Nichushkin, what happened with him obviously didn't help. But what was the biggest issue for the Colorado Avalanche this year? Because I thought by the end of the year, by the trade deadline, Chris McFarland did a very good job. He brought in Drouin, who is a revelation. He brought in Middlestat, brought in Walker. He certainly did a better job in year 2 of replacing Nazem Kadri's production than he did immediately following Kadri's departure. But the other part of this, which is honestly, maybe it's more important, to be quite honest. We can talk about if the Nuggets are better than they were last year and do all this stuff. Well, Russell Westbrook adds this over Reggie Jackson and Saric adds it. And we can, parcel all of this out and decide whether the Nuggets are a better team than they were 1 year ago. But what the Avalanche ran into, their reality, was not that they were so much worse necessarily than they were when they won a title. It's the number of teams that got better. And that is what the Nuggets are going to continue to run into. The Nuggets aren't dropping to the third or fourth best team in the Western Conference because they lost Kentavious Caldwell-Pope alone. It's that they lost him and Oklahoma City gained Alex Caruso and Isaiah Hartenstein. And Minnesota lost no one. And Dallas added Klay Thompson. That's the other half of this. So there's the half of, are the Nuggets better than they were a year ago by adding Saric and adding Russell Westbrook and asking Christian Brown to step in for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope? And we can debate that, and we'll find out once the fall rolls around. But the bigger concerning aspect of all of this is that there is a team in the Western Conference that is getting demonstrably better. And oh, by the way, they were ahead in the standings when 82 games were up last year. So those are kind of the two sides to it. But if you just look at the addition of Russell Westbrook and you don't look at it as a replacement for Bruce Brown, you just take it for what it's supposed to be. We had Reggie Jackson in that spot. Now we have Russell Westbrook. It is an upgrade. It is a better fit. It is an upgrade. And the Nuggets bench is better for it. But is that going to make the difference for the Denver Nuggets this year? No. It's 4, 5, 6 things down in the pecking order. And then even if the Nuggets are better than they were last year, so many other teams are also getting better. Don't mean to be a buzzkill. I don't, because I like the fit of Russell Westbrook. And I know even Paul Klee wrote about it today in the Gazette. Didn't really describe it at length, but mentioned that he's a little bit polarizing. I get there are people around here that don't like Russell Westbrook. He's better than Reggie Jackson. And he is a fit with the Denver Nuggets. This is a good move. It's just not the move that some members of the Nuggets fan base think it is. Because Russell Westbrook, at the end of the day, is past his prime, is not the player he was. To say that Nikola Jokic finally gets to play with another all-star, 2 MVPs on the same team, you're not getting that Russell Westbrook. So as long as it's kept in perspective, it's a good, solid move for the Denver Nuggets. And now we'll just wait for the Utah Jazz to buy him out and make sure just 100% that Russell Westbrook is coming to Colorado. Take your thoughts on it. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, we'll stick with hoops because Caitlin Clark rewrote the WNBA record book again, and now not just for a rookie, but why even a monster game still wasn't enough for the Indiana Fever to win last night. All right, just getting going. Thursday edition, Drive Time Sports. Happy to report that the show is back up and streaming live on X. Sat down with Elon and we got figured out. So Facebook, Instagram, and X, and YouTube. Add Extra Sports 1300 if you'd like to watch this show today or any day. Caitlin Clark last night had 24 points and 19 assists last night. When is the last time that a player had 24 points and 19 assists and their team lost the game? I mean, I'm sure it's happened. But if you told me that a team's best player had 24 and 19 and they lost, I would be quite surprised. I wouldn't have believed it unless I watched that game between Indiana and Dallas and I saw for myself that despite Caitlin Clark's 24 points and WNBA record, not rookie record, WNBA record, 19 assists, I would not have believed it. But they did lose. And this is not the first time that Caitlin Clark has put up an unbelievable stat line only for her team to lose. In fact, she has had 10 or more assists, which is, I think we'd all agree, a pretty high number, in 7 of her last 10 games. Indiana is 4-5. That math doesn't make sense. 4-6, excuse me, in their last 10. Math is hard. The point being, this is not the first time that Caitlin Clark's efforts have gone for naught. You remember the Chicago game? Caitlin Clark played extremely well. They lost. The very next game, Caitlin Clark, again, put up great numbers. Indiana lost. And there is a bit of a theme emerging in some of these games. And it has to do with the last handful of minutes. Something that is missing from the last few minutes of these games that is present for the rest of the game. Caitlin Clark shooting the basketball. That is what's missing. Last night, here is the sequence that ended up deciding the game in Dallas's favor. So Caitlin Clark assists on the game-tying three-point shot. From there, Melissa Smith got her shot blocked. Katie Lou Samuelson missed a three. And then in the midst of all that, Dallas keeps scoring and the game is essentially over. So 2 of the most important possessions of the game, the shots are taken by Melissa Smith and Katie Lou Samuelson. After the Seattle game, Christy Sides, the head coach of the Indiana Fever, said they needed to get better getting Caitlin Clark shots. Now, in typical Christy Sides fashion, she's just talking about her team and not herself. She mentioned setting better screens. She never once brought up, maybe I need to call a timeout, draw up a play, and get Caitlin Clark to shoot the basketball. Caitlin Clark is going through a very similar situation to what LeBron James went through early in his career. he was criticized quite a bit for what appeared to most people as an unwillingness to take shots down the stretch of games. That famous incident where he passed up a shot for himself, went to Donyell Marshall, who missed a shot, and the Cavs lost the game. That was the game where LeBron got chastised. This idea was born that he wasn't a big game player. And I think as time went on, that became a silly notion. And with time, people realized that LeBron James is going to make the right basketball play. You see this with Nikola Jokic right now. Nikola Jokic will always make the right basketball play. And that is not always calling your own number. So the coach, to me, needs to do a better job of making the best basketball play a Caitlin Clark shot. She makes the most difficult shots that anybody on that team can make. No one else on this team has the range of Caitlin Clark. She is the best shooter on this team. They need to make it so the right basketball play is Caitlin Clark taking a shot. And sometimes Caitlin Clark needs to understand that even if there's, and I don't know what's going through her head, I don't know what the percentage is. Is it a 2% better idea to pass? Is it a 5%? Is it sometimes you got to call your own number, because like LeBron in those early Cleveland days, Caitlin Clark is by far the best player on the Indiana Fever. And while the right basketball play may be to pass it up because of the defender coming or because somebody else has an open shot, sometimes the best basketball play is actually you taking a contested shot as opposed to somebody else taking an open shot. Caitlin Clark had one of her 5 best shooting nights last night, and she did not take a shot in the last couple of minutes when her team needed baskets the most. So that's something that her coach can help out with, but it's also something that ultimately Caitlin Clark has to understand herself. And maybe there's another level to it where Caitlin Clark, because of all the pressure she is under, feels like she has to be the best teammate. She keeps bringing it up. She wants to get her teammates in the right spot. She takes so much pride in making her team better. And that, her ability to do that, but also that conscious effort to do that, is why Indiana is relevant in the playoff picture. But sometimes you got to call your own number and say, you know what? I live with it. It may have been a slightly smarter basketball play to give the ball up because I had a defender on me, but I'm Caitlin Clark. I'm the best player on the floor. Sometimes, and this is not none of this is a criticism, mind you, of Caitlin Clark. It's just a learning process. That's all this is. It's learning. She is a rookie, after all, playing on perhaps the worst basketball team she has ever been on in her life. It's possible. She will start to understand once Indiana makes a coaching change, which they inevitably will, and they get a coach that can help her out a little bit with that kind of stuff. both on the floor and off of it, right? Instilling in her, like, sometimes you got to call your own number, but also drawing up plays, scheming to make the best play a Caitlin Clark shot down the stretch of a basketball game, because this happens way too much. It's 3 or 4 games now that you watch or you look in the box score and you're like, why isn't Caitlin Clark taking a shot? It's not because Clark is unafraid, or is afraid, I should say, of the moment. She's unafraid. It's the same with LeBron James. LeBron James was never afraid to take a shot. He's always been the most confident in himself. But it's learning that sometimes you're the best option, regardless of the situation. That it's better if you have the ball in your hands. And she's going to continue to learn that as she goes along. And then hopefully the team gets better around her and takes some of the pressure off. But there are too many games where she's not shooting late in them. And it's just because she is going out of her way sometimes to get her teammates looks, and she always wants to make the right basketball play. See it with LeBron James early in his career, even Nikola Jokic. You see this. But tremendous. Live to fight another day. The bigger story of last night, of course, is Caitlin Clark setting a WNBA record for assists in a game. And if I may, just to get one last little thing in there before, this conversation completely goes away. Is 24 and 19 a little bit more impressive than 10 and 13 points and rebounds? Still some people trying to push Angel Reese as the rookie of the year in this league. Like, it's different with Caitlin Clark. And it's okay, because I would love to have Angel Reese on my basketball team. I think she's going to be tremendous, and she's going to get even better. And she might start putting up, when she starts making those shots around the rim, she's going to be putting up 20 and 10 on a nightly basis. It's easy to get excited about what Angel Reese could be in the future, but right now, the player that's putting up these unbelievable stat lines on a nightly basis is not Angel Reese, who's just squeaking by to get a double-double. It's Caitlin Clark, who flirts with a triple-double almost every night and is putting up 24 and 13, 24 and 15, 20 and 19. It's different. Not all double-doubles are made equally. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, ESPN does what they do best, making lists that people absolutely hate, but it has, to their credit, spawned, I think, kind of an interesting idea for you and I. And I'll get to that next on Extra Sports 1300. 719-247-1313 is the text line if you want to interact with the show. Steve G is in on Russell Westbrook, one step closer to becoming a Denver Nugget, as today he was traded from the Clippers to the Jazz, who are expected to buy him out. And once that happens, he will sign for a minimum contract with the Denver Nuggets. And I think that's a good way of looking at it. If I had one piece of advice on how to view Russell Westbrook coming to Denver, look at how much he's getting paid by the Denver Nuggets. He is a vet minimum. So the bar should be set at whatever vet minimum expectations are. And if he's better than that, then awesome. But I fear too many people are starting to look back at his, basketball reference page. And it's like, he's not that dude anymore. And the Clippers don't want him. So I don't want to completely poo-poo the move, because I do think it's an upgrade over what they had in Reggie Jackson. But we can't get too carried away. Steve G says Westbrook is just a breather for a starter. If he averages 15, I'll be very happy. If he averages 15 points a game, I think you'd be ecstatic. Because that's more than he averaged last year. Talk more about Russell Westbrook's impending arrival in Colorado in just a little bit. But ESPN's put out this list of the best athletes, greatest athlete. Well, how they put it, best, greatest athletes since the year 2000, ranking the top 100 pro athletes of the 21st century. And I looked at this list, and I don't know. And it's difficult. We just went through this, right? We did our Goat of Goats tournament, and it became very difficult. It's very subjective. Whenever you bring in international people into the mix, it gets even more difficult to be able to do this. So I understand, but you put it out there, and so I'm going to react to it. Number one on the list was Michael Phelps. And there was a theme that emerged from the top 10 for the most part. And it's global reach. Okay, the stage. If the stage you play on is more global, you are clearly favored in this. So Michael Phelps, number one. Serena Williams, number two. And I don't necessarily have an issue with those two. In our Goat of Goats tournament, I made a case that Serena should have advanced further than she did because she was dominant. Dominant to a level that even some of the other GOATs in our tournament were not in their particular sport. So it's Michael Phelps, it's Serena, it's Lionel Messi, which makes things, no pun intended, a bit messy because you're bringing in soccer, which is a global game and far more popular than the sports that you and I hold dear in this country. And then they got to LeBron at number 4. And he is above Tom Brady. So I can't figure out what I have more of a problem with. But I do have a problem with this. Because one of two things have to be true. Okay? One, you are prioritizing the athletes who are, I don't want to keep saying popular because this is not a popularity contest. This is how good the athletes are. But clearly ESPN has favored the athletes who have a global stage to play on. So let's put it that way, a global stage. If you put more weight behind athletes that have that kind of a stage, right? Compete in the Olympics, compete in different countries, marquee world events. How is Tom Brady 5? right? How is Tom Brady over Roger Federer, over Tiger Woods? If you set this tone early, that it's, hey, if you compete and dominate on an international level with the greatest athletes all over the world, then you get placed higher. How is Tom Brady 5th on this list? And by the way, how is Tom Brady 5th and Peyton Manning all the way down in the late 20s? Brady is better than Manning, unequivocally the GOAT when it comes to the NFL. We already went through that. But Tom Brady is not 23 athletes separated from Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning has more MVPs than some of these, athletes have. And now all of them are MVPs, I suppose. But like Kobe Bryant he's 10th on the list. Steph Curry's on the list. Duncan, Shaq, Aaron Donald, Patrick Mahomes, all ranked above Peyton Manning. So either you're breaking kind of your own thing here, or saying that Tom Brady is so great and so much greater than anybody else who has ever played the sport of football that he must be included in the top 5. I just don't think that if you're prioritizing athletes who competed at an international level, that Brady would be above Federer, or even not even Federer. How is Federer higher than Djokovic? We just decided that Djokovic was tennis's GOAT. How is Federer above Djokovic? But if you're just taking, you're not looking at the international aspect to it. LeBron's not even the GOAT in his own sport, which I understand Michael Jordan didn't play after the year 2000, but Tom Brady should be ahead of LeBron James. Because Tom Brady is the closest thing football has to Michael Jordan in terms of the dominance, the amount of winning, like that argument that everybody makes for first and foremost for Michael Jordan over LeBron James. Tom Brady kind of has that same argument. So I don't know what went into ESPN's thinking on this, but either way, Tom Brady 5th doesn't make a lot of sense to me. And then again, you have Djokovic, who's below Federer. You have Tiger Woods 8th, which I don't agree with. And then what was the other? Oh, yeah, Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning being 26th. From Tom Brady to Peyton Manning, 20 athletes in between. That seems like too many. So I don't like this list. Now, they did have Nikola Jokic 28th behind LeBron, Kobe, Shaq, Duncan, Steph, which I agree with all of those. Nikola Jokic is not above LeBron, not above Kobe, Shaq, Duncan, or Steph yet. The curious one that I found when it comes to the NBA, why they have Kevin Garnett so high? Nikola Jokic is above Kevin Garnett. And they have Kevin Garnett 23rd. So looking at Jokic, I'm okay with him being behind LeBron, Kobe, Shaq, Duncan, and Steph. He's better than KG. That's done. Another MVP, a championship. And I'm not demeaning Kevin Garnett's championship. I'm just saying Nikola Jokic has one of those too. And was more and performed at a higher level winning his than Kevin Garnett did winning his. So flaws all over this list. But it did give me an idea. And maybe that's the best thing that came out of it. What if we were to just do this with Colorado athletes? Now, you had to play in Colorado because I had this discussion out in the hallways earlier. I'm not including the athletes from Colorado. These are the athletes that played for Colorado teams. If you think I am misguided in that, you can let me know, 719-247-1313. But when I rank these, I went with athletes who played in Colorado. That's what I did. So no Christian McCaffrey, no Lindsey Vonn, no Michaela Schifrin. And Schifrin's really the only one that I go, well, she can't play for a team. She plays for Team USA. Colorado is in the USA. But we all got to draw a line somewhere. So I have 10. I'll give you half of them now, half of them after the break. Or perhaps after I take some of your vitriol. At number 10, and again, this is from the year 2000, because I think it's far more interesting when you take number 7 out of the equation. When John Elway is removed from the equation, the conversation gets much more interesting. When you include him, it's like you really can't get around him. And then you know how it's going to end up. So since the year 2000, at number 10, I have Nolan Arenado. Won 8 Gold Gloves, made 2 playoff appearances, which, if memory serves, is exactly half of the playoff appearances that the Colorado Rockies have made, right? 2 of the 5. I mean, it's so few, you think I would remember. But 2 playoff appearances, 8 Gold Gloves, one of probably the 5 best players in the major leagues during his time with the Colorado Rockies. Obviously, his career continued elsewhere. And that's another thing about this list. I am taking into account what they did in Colorado. So at number 10, I have Nolan Arenado. At number 9, I have Peter Forsberg. And your first inclination might be mine, where it's like, yeah, the Avs were kind of done with that first run the year 2000. Well, they were done. That group was done winning Stanley Cups in the year 2000 or 2001, which actually counts towards this. But we forget that Sakic, Forsberg, they hung around for a little bit. So Forsberg had a Stanley Cup, missed a year, came back and won MVP of the league. So I have him at number 9. At number 8, I have Cale Makar. And he is the guy on my list that I say, fast forward 5 years, 10 years, he might be near the top. We just haven't had enough time with Cale Makar yet. He came in so late. But already Norris Trophy, Rookie of the Year, Stanley Cup, Conn Smythe. He he's where he is now, but he's going to jump 4 or 5 of these athletes before all is said and done, easily. Just right now, as impressive as the sample size is, it's still a relatively small sample size. And at number 7, I have Carmelo Anthony. Does not have the trophies that Cale Makar has, so I know, bring it on. I know this is going to, but Carmelo Anthony turning around the Nuggets organization, making the playoffs every year, going to a Western Conference final, became one of the greatest players in Nuggets history in his time in Denver. I have Carmelo Anthony at number 7, and at number 6, I have Joe Sakic. Sakic also in that, since the year 2000, winning a Stanley Cup and a Hart Trophy, played for longer than Peter Forsberg did, or played more games. Peter Forsberg was hurt, and then he was back and was hurt. But I have Joe Sakic at number 6. So that's my list so far. 719-247-1313. After the break, take some of your thoughts and then give you my top 5 Colorado athletes since the year 2000. This is Drive Time Sports on Extra Sports 1300. Welcome in Drive Time Sports on a Thursday. Reminder, you can watch the show live on our social media platforms, Facebook, X, Instagram, and YouTube. The handle is all the same at XTRA Sports 1300. If you're just dropping in, dovetailing off of ESPN's list of the top 100 athletes since the turn of the century, since Y2K, which I have some problems with the list. The criteria are not clearly identified. It seemed like early on in the list, they were factoring in the athletes who play on a global stage. And while the Super Bowl is shown in every country, the NFL is the most American sport there is. It does not translate into other countries. Goodell's trying, and maybe one day Patrick Mahomes will be looked at on the same scale as an NBA player or a soccer player. He's just not there. And Tom Brady certainly isn't. So if you're prioritizing athletes who compete on an international stage with, Michael Phelps and Serena Williams, and Tom Brady can't be fifth. But then if you just take who he's behind and compare it to LeBron, Tom Brady's above LeBron. If the international stage is not what you're talking about, that you're just talking about accomplishment. And then Peyton Manning's too far down the list. I think Jokic is in a pretty good spot. I have a little bit of an issue with Kevin Garnett, but because Garnett has played a longer career than Jokic, maybe he gets a slight nod, but who's better? Right? That has to factor. Who's better? When you're talking about sport versus sport, the same sport, that's the apples to apples comparison. Doesn't who's better come into play a little bit as long as you meet a certain threshold in terms of having a championship or multiple MVPs? 3 times Nikola Jokic was voted the best in his sport. Probably should have been 4 times. Kevin Garnett once was considered the best player in the league. Once. Both have a championship. Nikola Jokic did more heavy lifting on his team than Kevin Garnett did on his. I'm not saying Kevin Garnett shouldn't be on this list or should be number 100, but I would take Jokic over Garnett. But Shaq, Steph, Kobe, LeBron, Duncan, I have no problem with that. But it got me thinking about Colorado athletes since the year 2000, because excluding Elway is always how I want to have these conversations, not because of any ill will towards John Elway. It's just he's just this black hole of you can't put anybody over John Elway. Even when Nikola Jokic, or if Nikola Jokic wins his second title, and you could say, look at the resume, people around here aren't going to want to hear it. Not for a while anyway. It's like the GOAT debate between LeBron and Jordan. There's a day coming up in the next 10 to 20 years where the general consensus is that LeBron is the GOAT, right? That's happening. And it is our duty to instill into the next generation why they are so wrong. And I'm pleased to report I don't make much of an impact on my children, but I have gone through to them because they both will say that Michael Jordan is the GOAT over LeBron James. So I have told them to go out into the world and evangelize and get other kids their age to get on the same page, because I, quite frankly, don't want to think about a world where LeBron James is considered the GOAT over Michael Jordan. It's not a world I want to be a part of. So I'm doing my part. I don't recycle as much as I should, but I do tell every child that I can that Michael Jordan is the GOAT over LeBron James. But with John Elway, he just looms so large in Colorado sports history that only time or Nikola Jokic doubling his MVPs and quadrupling his NBA titles may put him above John Elway in people's minds. So the time frame of this, I think, creates a little bit better conversation. So the first 5 I had, at 10, I had Nolan Arenado, 9, Peter Forsberg. Most of his career took place before the year 2000. So this is post 2000, Peter Forsberg. Cale Makar, who I think Cale Makar, when all is said and done, may only rank behind Nikola Jokic on a list like this in 10 years. So while I feel pretty good about where I put Cale Makar now, he's just going to start jumping all of these athletes. And then I have Melo at number 7. Number 6, I had Joe Sakic. Ryan texted in and said I would have Tulo or Helton over Arenado. I will tell you and pay off this tease shortly. One of those two is in my top 5. I think you could guess who. I would put Nolan above Tulo. Both actually ended quite terribly, if you recall. Both of their careers in Colorado came to an unceremonious end. But I'd have Arenado over Tulo. Helton, you're absolutely right, and that's why I will get to him shortly. At number 5, I have Peyton Manning. Now, if this were just to take, if the time in Colorado wasn't weighted the way that I have it for this, Peyton Manning would be number 1. But to put the Colorado accomplishments of Peyton Manning, I think it sits him at number 5 on my list. Saved the Broncos franchise, put up monster numbers, went to 2 Super Bowls, won 1. He was less responsible for the getting to the second one as he was the first one. But Peyton Manning still, for only you want to talk about Cale Makar with an impressive, albeit small sample size. How about Peyton Manning? So I'd have him at number 5. Then I would go Todd Helton at number 4. And with him getting inducted into Cooperstown, I think that has to be a part of it, right? He's being inducted into the Hall of Fame, which is something that some of these other athletes aren't going to do for many, many years. But I heard John Smoltz yesterday on Dan Patrick, and he said something that I absolutely loved, because now that he's being immortalized into Cooperstown, I think more people are talking about just how good Todd Helton was. John Smoltz said that Shohei Ohtani was a blend of Todd Helton and Barry Bonds. And that is extremely high praise for Shohei Ohtani, but for Todd Helton as well. Because The Rockies were so irrelevant for so many years. So many people did not understand just how good of a hitter Todd Helton was. I said when the day I had the Cooperstown conference call with him, and I played some of that audio on the show last week, talking about Bonds, Gwynn, Griffey, Helton. Those are the greatest hitters of my lifetime. And now that he's being put into Cooperstown, he's kind of being separated from the garbage that is the Colorado Rockies. And people are looking at his numbers and like, oh, yeah, he's great. But multiple All-Star appearances, World Series appearance, batting title, should have won the MVP, but didn't. So that's why he's a little bit further down. But Todd Helton and all these next three guys are all champions. So it would be hard to put Helton. But I think there's something poetic about Todd Helton being above Peyton Manning on this list. It's like the old Tennessee days. So Todd Helton's at number 4. At number 3, and this was a late flip-flop from me, I'm going to put Von Miller at 3. But I went back and forth on this. But I would just barely have Nathan McKinnon over Von Miller. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that now Nathan McKinnon has that MVP. It's a little bit unfair because Von Miller in his position don't win MVPs. I understand that, but Von Miller doesn't have a Defensive Player of the Year to his credit either. Now, that's not to disparage Von Miller at all. Been to 2 Super Bowls. They don't get to either without Von Miller. And you know the one they won without him, who knows what that season would have ended up being. So Von Miller's phenomenal. But now with McKinnon having the championship, having the MVP, and also the other years where he was a finalist for the MVP, I would have Nathan McKinnon just above Von Miller. And some of that too is, I mean, how many years of Von Miller's career have been wasted? Like Nathan McKinnon talked about being in the league going into his 9th year and he hasn't won bleep. Like he did more in a lot of those years. The Avs did more a lot of those years than some of the years with Von Miller. So, I mean, it holds Todd Helton down, holds Von Miller down a little bit. So Von Miller at 3, Nathan McKinnon at 2, and then obviously Nikola Jokic. 3 MVPs, should be 4. A title, a finals MVP. And already one of the best approaching. It is reasonable to say that he will be one of the 5 best players of his generation. If you want to include him with the players he's listed with on ESPN's list, LeBron, Kobe, Shaq, Duncan, and Steph. One of those guys are getting jumped by Nikola Jokic before all is said and done. So that's my list. Pick away. No, Aaron, I did not put Michael Porter on my list. He was not even in consideration for the top 10. Top 12, then MPJ. Definitely on there. But I think I've filled my quota a little bit by putting Melo where I did. 719-247-1313. Speaking of the Denver Nuggets, so with the moves that the Denver Nuggets have made, are they better than they were 1 year ago? Talk about it next on Extra Sports 1300. Best athletes in the state of Colorado, played in the state of Colorado since the year 2000, based on ESPN's farce of a list of the top 100 pro athletes since the year 2000. I knew that I would get some of the criticism I am receiving. I fully expected, like this from Josiah says, Boo Mellow. Not Boo Mellow. I will recognize his place in Nuggets history and how good of a player he was, because those are facts. But I'm not going to the mat anymore for him to have his jersey retired or anything like that. Because I can acknowledge what he was as a player, what he meant to the Nuggets organization when he was here, but also notice that he very much would rather be associated with the New York Knicks, and that's fine. That's his prerogative. Peyton Manning has clearly chosen that he would rather be linked with and identified more as a Bronco than a Colt. It's his prerogative. But also don't expect people in Colorado to be bearing torches towards Ball Arena to get Carmelo Anthony's number retired. Let's see. What else? Ryan says Chauncey didn't even make the list. No. Because again, if I take into account or put even weight between what Chauncey did with Detroit and what Chauncey did with Denver, then he makes the list. But he has an even smaller sample size than Peyton Manning or Cale Makar does. And the best thing that they did was get to the Western Conference Finals, and he was not the best player on the team at that time. Melo was. But he would be honorable mention. So would Patrick Waugh, because Waugh stuck around for a few years after. And that's what becomes so tricky. Like the Broncos of Elway, Davis, Sharp, McCaffrey, all those guys were like done. Right? So it's easy to leave them. With the Avs, they kind of brought us in to the new century, right? But you just got to you got to lop off their career at 2000 and take everything after that. And it's hard to put Sakic or Forsberg up higher on the list and even put Waugh on the list because we're just taking after year 2000. If they get, and it's kind of like my thing with the Nordiques, that I don't think that the Avalanche should co-opt that history, but I do acknowledge it's a little bit tougher with Joe Sakic, who played for both teams. It's kind of the same thing here. Do you take Sakic all the way back to the beginning of his Avalanche career? Then it's a much different topic. But if it's since the year 2000, I can't put Sakic that high up. Aaron, by the way, Aaron, welcome back to the fold. Haven't heard from you in a while. Hopefully everything's going well. Aaron with a couple of texts, one about Sakic, but the other one was Ichiro isn't on your list of greatest hitters in your lifetime. It would be. He would be. That wasn't an intentional omission. Not at all. Ichiro was phenomenal. Bonds, Griffey, Helton, Gwynn. Yeah, and probably Ichiro was the next guy on that list. And, Trout, Ohtani's quickly climbing up the list. But absolutely, Ichiro would be one of the greatest hitters of my lifetime. I was just more thinking as I was growing up. And I guess I was growing up during Ichiro, but that was not an intentional omission. Ichiro would absolutely be on that list. And he, by the way, he's on ESPN's list as well of the top 100 professional athletes since the year 2000. He was unbelievable. Remember that Mariners team? How in the world did they not win the World Series that year? I'm sure people in Seattle are asking that question to this day. And also, what did we do to deserve having our Sonics taken away? Those are probably the two questions they're asking on a daily basis. From the 719, I wouldn't put too much notice on what ESPN thinks who the best jocks are post Y2K. This is the same Disney that gave the Tillman Award to a snooty prince for shuffling paper. Now, let's not. Prince Harry is very much involved with Invictus Games, so I don't want to diminish it. And also, you're talking about a fellow ginger, and I'm not going to say anything bad about a fellow ginger. We have to stick together because our lives are so difficult. Now, there are degrees to it. And one day, Prince Harry and I will get together at the Ginger Convention, and we will compare the misfortunes in our lives. And I think I feel pretty good about winning that one. But I'm not going to. It's actually a pact that we make as soon as we can speak. We take a blood oath to never speak ill of anybody else that is of the pale-skinned redhead variety. But your point is maybe not about Prince Harry, but about ESPN's Will Taken. The content ESPN pushes out, I look at the same way as I look at their sports broadcasts. Right? It's not the best. They're not the best broadcast. They don't have the best broadcast crew in any sport. They don't. But they do a great job of distributing it. They're a great disseminator of information. Right? But like for the NBA, I'll take Turner every day of the week over what ESPN and Disney puts out there. I'll take the Infinity sports lineup that we have on this station over what they have on ESPN radio any day of the week. And I'll take talking heads from other networks over theirs, but they have a big megaphone and they certainly do a great job of disseminating information, and doesn't mean it's the best content, but it's content. They are very good at that. 719-247-1313. So Nuggets are looking like they're going to add Russell Westbrook after all. And I know it's a little bit triggering perhaps for sports fans around here for a Colorado team to acquire Russell Westbrook. I just saw a headline. I didn't read the piece from Mark Kisla, but I know he wrote something in the Gazette about how hopefully this Russ W does better in Denver than Russell Wilson did. And I get that. That's low-hanging fruit. You could do that. The difference here is what Russell Westbrook is being expected to do, being asked to do. Russell Wilson was the savior of the Denver Broncos. That's what he was billed as. If Russell Wilson Just think about it. If we'll flip the Steelers and the Broncos, right? Let's say that Pittsburgh traded for Russell Wilson and gave him that monster contract extension. And a couple of years down the road, the Broncos signed this version of Russell Wilson. You would like that. You'd be much more okay with that as a Broncos fan than you are about Russell Wilson now. And for good reason, right? Russell Wilson was supposed to save the Broncos franchise. Russell Westbrook isn't saving anything. What Russell Westbrook is doing is called ring chasing. And when you are chasing rings, there's also this understanding that you are past your prime, that you are not near the player you once were. You are a bit player that's looking to play a complementary role to a team that is ready to win a championship. So as long as that perspective is kept all the way through, there's no reason why Colorado sports fans can't be more content with what Russell Westbrook brings to Colorado than Russell Wilson. In fact, I would say that Russell Westbrook is very similar as a basketball player to what Russell Wilson is as a football player. And the Steelers are paying him like it. The Broncos aren't. Broncos are still paying him like he's a franchise quarterback. Steelers aren't. Found money. These buyout guys, they're found money. Anything you get from them is fine. And I just looking at some of the numbers, going from Reggie Jackson to Russell Westbrook, just based on their stats last year, you're adding a point per game, 3 rebounds per game, and a half an assist. And then you think about the fit and what is surrounding Russell Westbrook as opposed to what's surrounding Reggie Jackson. So while you just compare these two players from last year and say that Westbrook is an upgrade, you also have to account for how much better Russell Westbrook could be with Denver, because he will see the floor with Nikola Jokic. Right? There will be those times. He'll play with Jamal Murray. He'll have regular season Michael Porter Jr. staggered with the twos sometimes. Like, Russell Westbrook's going to prove, I think, to be a fairly significant upgrade over Reggie Jackson, but we're still talking about a backup point guard. Michael Malone, the other day when he was interviewed during this Nuggets Summer League game about what the Nuggets still need to add to the roster, he said a backup to Jamal Murray. That's what Russell Westbrook is. It's noteworthy. He is a name. Right? But it's Russell Westbrook on the Denver Nuggets is Russell Wilson on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Except the Steelers don't have the good sense to make him their backup yet. Yes, it's a noteworthy addition. Still comes down to, is Christian Brown really can he replace Kentavious Caldwell-Pope? Be an adequate replacement for that? Because Reggie Jackson was not an adequate replacement for Bruce Brown. And now you're talking about an even bigger role a more significant role that Christian Brown is stepping into. So, yeah, we don't have anything else to get into now, Nuggets related. So, why not? I get it. And it is an upgrade for the second unit. But if we're really going to have the big conversation about moving the needle and the Nuggets perhaps being, I don't know, like George Karl put out on social media today, back on top of the Western Conference, Coach Karl is just setting people up for disappointment. Because even adding Russell Westbrook and adding Dario Saric, the Nuggets are not better on paper than Oklahoma City. They're not better than Minnesota on paper. Russell Westbrook doesn't make them better than either one of those teams. It should not change your mind. If you think that the Nuggets are on top of the West anyway, then fine. But if you move them down the pecking order because they lost Kentavious Caldwell-Pope and because Oklahoma City did what they did, and you saw Minnesota and Denver play in the playoffs, adding Russell Westbrook, do you think Russell Westbrook would have made a difference in that playoff series? No. But it is interesting. It's interesting that this will be the first guy to be named to an All-Star game that Nikola Jokic has ever played with. 719-247-1313. We'll continue on with Drive Time Sports in just a moment. But first, I want to let you know that if you've been kept from doing what you love to do, especially this time of year, which is probably outdoor activities, because of that arthritic joint pain in your knees, hips, back, or shoulder, and you've been told it's got to be surgery, got to be drugs, that's the answer. Maybe not. Maybe not. QC Kinetics is offering an alternative. They are the nation's leader in advanced regenerative medicine. Essentially, they are treatments that accelerate your own body's healing properties to revitalize your joints so you can move again. They've helped so many people here and tens of thousands of people across the country. Learn how QC Kinetics can treat the pain, enhance your joints, restore your mobility, and give you long-term relief with no downtime with a free consultation. 719-347-1988. 719-347-1988. QC Kinetics, the future of medicine. 719-347-1988. You know, with all of this talk about greatest athletes and in the 21st century and GOATs and all of this stuff that we do as we are biding our time until football season begins, it got me wondering, when will Bronny James appear on one of these lists? Because I don't know if you've seen, but Bronny's turned a corner. Bronny played well. Made his first three-pointer of the summer league. And I'm glad, because this dude has been taking so much crap. I mean, it's easy to root for Bronny because he never asked for any of this. He just wanted to fulfill a dream that many people do, and that is to be a professional athlete. And in trying to ensure, as we all try to do with our children, to ensure that they are successful, to set them up in life, I thought LeBron James went a little bit too far, and it's actually put Bronny in a really precarious position. And then he starts off summer league horribly, and the noise gets louder and louder and louder. And so I am glad to see that at least Bronny can put some of that stuff to the side, and he talked about it. He's not listening to that stuff. And LeBron said a couple weeks ago that Bronny does not give a bleep, and it seems like he doesn't. And I'm glad. He should just focus on what he's doing. He shouldn't apologize for where he is. He should just work his butt off and make sure that people like me and you don't have every reason to say you don't deserve it. But I saw, what's this conversation making the rounds? It doesn't surprise me that it comes from Gilbert Arenas' show, because there are some wild things put out on that program that don't make sense and aren't based in reality. And somebody on that show pointed out that Jaylen Brown had a similar start to his summer league, his first summer league that Bronny did. And look how Jaylen Brown turned out. And this is the fun that we have with numbers, right? We all do it. We manipulate them to fit our argument. Or we may honestly look at a set of numbers and say, whoa, I didn't know that, and it might change your mind on something. The difference is there was actual belief that Jaylen Brown, despite his slow start to Summer League, would still become a good pro. And that's why I said going into the Summer League, the expectation for Bronny is that he will fail. The expectation for all these other rookies, not all, but the vast majority, is they'll be good. Like, there are some busts and some players mixed in there. But if you're going to compare Jaylen Brown to Bronny, it's not apples to apples. It's not. Jaylen Brown was an accomplished college star that was taken near the top of the draft. Bronny only went 55th because LeBron willed it so. Bronny is not the player coming out of USC that Jaylen Brown was at Cal. So it just, he can overcome his slow start to the Summer League. He can be better. Can't be worse, right? It couldn't have gotten worse for Bronny James as Summer League went along. It had to get better. But you can't compare this to other semi-notable. I don't think Jaylen Brown was like looked at as this franchise-altering player, but he was a really good player. It's not the same, is my point. But I am glad that Bronny was able to play well because it had to been weighing on him, even if he doesn't listen to the outside noise. He doesn't have to, right? It's kind of like with his dad. He doesn't have to tell the Lakers to draft Bronny. He doesn't have to tell the Lakers to hire JJ Redick. They're just going to do it because they know him well enough. They have enough awareness to understand that this is what LeBron wants, and they will do it. It's the same thing with Bronny. Even if he doesn't listen to the outside noise, you don't think it enters into his mind after he airballs a corner three and shoots 3 of 17 or whatever he was the other day, that he doesn't at least think about, oh, I bet they're going in on me on first take today. There's a difference between listening to it, internalizing it, as opposed to just being aware of it. Like, Bronny might not care what people say about him, but he knows they're talking about him. And he knows what situation he came into. Right? That's the other part of it. He knows why he's where he is. And I think in an honest moment, an honest, quiet moment, he would be thinking, I know why I'm here. And maybe I got this gig because of my dad, but I'm going to show that I deserved it. And that's it. It should be his mentality. And I hope he's able to do that. Because it is a cool story that a father and son will play together. It would be a great story if Bronny came back from that cardiac episode he had before his first year at USC to become a successful, to some degree, NBA player. Like, Bronny James could be a very good story. But he's not right now because of all this other stuff. And it's not him, it's his dad. But Bronny turning it around a little bit in Summer League. And he did say, and the best thing about Bronny was not the game he had last night. It was that he recently said he was okay with going to the G League. That's the best thing. That dude needs to get out of the spotlight and work on his game. Get him and Braun on the floor together in a preseason game and then put Bronny wherever their G League affiliate is and just let him work on his game. He could be like the basketball version of a September call-up. Like, just go there, go away, work on your game, and late in the season, bring you in, and then we can have or get it out of the way opening night. I don't know. But the best thing for Bronny is to not be sitting at the end of the Laker bench as an active member of the LA Lakers. Those G League guys can sometimes come up to the big club, so to speak, just in case. 719-247-1313 is the number if you want to interact with the show. Art does. And wants to talk about hitters and greatest hitters. Says, growing up in San Diego, I watched Tony Gwynn play probably a couple hundred times, and no one was better. He could do with a baseball what a regular person can do with slow pitch softball. Magician with a bat, averaged 1 strikeout every 25. or so at bats over 20 years and 10,000 plate appearances. Unreal. More than 10,000 plate appearances. Tony Gwynn was unreal. And if not for that completely nuts Barry Bonds year, remember the Barry Bonds year where he was like, he hit more home runs than he struck out or something like that because he was walked all the time like that. And his on base percentage was just astronomical. If not for that, we would talk more about Tony Gwynn. And isn't that kind of the way it is with baseball in general? I was thinking about that. I saw a stat on SportsCenter the other day that Aaron Judge can become, I think, just the 5th player to have 3 seasons of 50 or more home runs. Now, I know it's baseball's place in the sports landscape is part of the reason why we're not talking about it. But I think the other reason is the names on that list. What Aaron Judge is doing right now is unbelievable. It would be a massive accomplishment if he were to get a third 50 home run season. But because he is on a list with Bonds and McGuire and A-Rod, people aren't going to want to dig into it too much because those kind of numbers are tainted. It's kind of the same thing with the guys that weren't hitting bombs, like Todd Helton, like Tony Gwynn, like Ichiro. If we didn't have these chemically enhanced home run bashers, guys like Gwynn and Helton and Ichiro would be talked about more. And Todd Helton, Tony Gwynn, Ichiro, those guys were vastly superior hitters to Mark McGuire. Bonds is forever the tricky one, right? Because you know how good Barry Bonds is. Like, a lot of that season had to do with how good he was of a hitter, not steroids. It was a little bit steroids, a little bit. But yeah, I just appreciate that Todd Helton's name is being brought up a little bit more and people are understanding now that he's being enshrined into Cooperstown how legit of a hitter he was. And then it leads you down a road to also talk about Tony Gwynn. And think about the two of them were in the same division for a time. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, we'll hit the 3 stories that are driving the show on Extra Sports 1300. Hello there. Welcome in. Drive Time Sports on this Thursday. Ryan Kaufman with you. You want to chat? We can chat. Hit me up on the text line 719-247-1313. Better yet, call in. But both forms of communication are accepted. You can also find me on social media. I am at Gingerly Tweets on X. Got you till 6 o'clock, and we start this hour with the very familiar segment known as What's Driving the Show. All right, story number one today is that we are one step closer to getting Russell Westbrook in a Denver Nuggets uniform at long last. Today, the LA Clippers have traded Russell Westbrook to the Utah Jazz. The Jazz have no need for him, so they are going to buy him out, and then it is expected that he will then sign for the vet minimum to play for the Denver Nuggets. And there are a lot of feelings that this conjures up. Even the name Russell conjures up some feelings among Colorado sports fans. But if you're thinking about that Russell, look at it this way. Imagine you are the Steelers and getting that Russell. Not as much at stake. It's kind of the same thing with Russell Westbrook. You're not asking Russell Westbrook to come in and be Jamal Murray's replacement. You're asking him to be his backup. He's a bench player whose team didn't even want him anymore. That doesn't mean he doesn't have value. But it does mean that expectations should be much, much lower than they were when the last Russell came to Colorado. He's better than Reggie Jackson. Right? That's the best thing I can say about Russell Westbrook. But I think it's not the Russell W thing. That's just a fun coincidence. I think what is really getting the perspective on this move a little bit off is because you could argue this is the biggest named player to ever play for the Denver Nuggets. Right? I mean, maybe Allen Iverson probably. He would be bigger. But this is a guy who has won an MVP. He's a guy who's played, I believe, in multiple All-Star games. And I think that's what's fueling this a little bit. This idea that he's more than he is. He's a cast-off. He was unwanted in his last workplace. But that doesn't mean he can't be an upgrade over what the Nuggets had. And this is what they have to do now. This is the world we live in. And I continue to wonder if it's ultimately for the best of the NBA that they have this level of parity and are getting this level of parity through soul-crushing financial restrictions. Time will only tell on that. But this is the kind of business that a team like the Denver Nuggets has to conduct or is chosen to conduct in the new NBA. You get a little bit better here, a little bit better there. Maybe you sacrifice something, but you get something else. And then you hope it all adds up and it all comes out even in the wash. That's the bet that the Denver Nuggets are making for this year. Out goes Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. In comes Russell Westbrook and Dario Saric, and they hope that with Christian Brown taking on a bigger role, that he will be an adequate replacement for Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. I don't fault the logic. I understand what they're trying to do, because it's much like the Avs with a hard cap in the NHL, or a flat cap, tried to do the last couple of years. It's the reality. But I don't think 2 years removed now from an NBA title that the Nuggets are good as they were 2 years ago. And that's by Adam Silver's design, which we can never forget this, is by an NBA owner's design. Let's not forget who Adam Silver works for. The Nuggets are not a better team than they were 2 years ago. With all these moves, they're not better. Until I see Christian Brown in that role, getting an increased number of minutes for the Denver Nuggets and see that he's capable, I can't say that the Nuggets are better than they were last year. I can't say that adding Russell Westbrook and Dario Saric is a net positive after losing Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. I don't feel that way. It still depends on Christian Brown taking that 2-guard spot. And then it's about other guys on the roster like Julian Strawther and Peyton Watson and their progression. They could end up being better than they were last year. But on paper, you can't say they are. One thing's for sure here with Russell Westbrook. It's going to be interesting. Right? It's an interesting move by the Denver Nuggets. It's like Pittsburgh adding Russell Wilson. You go, and then you talk yourself into that being a good idea because you're not paying anything for him. Just got to keep the perspective. That's all. Story number 2 is you can have a more grandiose perspective on Caitlin Clark, because even in a game where she had 24 points and a WNBA record, 19 assists, I still see a player who's learning and who's going to get better. Yes, Caitlin Clark will be better than she is right now. Because I watched that game last night against the Dallas Wings, that Indiana lost, and it follows a familiar pattern of Caitlin Clark putting up an incredible stat line and Indiana losing. And it has to do with the last few minutes of the game. Once again, Caitlin Clark not taking shots down the stretch. Because she has such a high basketball IQ. And she is so bent on, whether it's because of the heat she has taken inside of league circles, that feels some of that resentment, feels some of that judgment. Oh, you think you're better than us type of stuff. Is that why she's so deferential? Or is she just that deferential by nature? I saw a lot of Iowa games where late in games, it was Caitlin Clark taking shots. So she'll get there for Indiana. I think more than anything else is that she is wired to make the right basketball play. But as counterintuitive as it sounds, sometimes the better option is you. Just period. You taking the shot. Even passing it to a more wide open teammate, that may not actually be the right basketball play. And I think her coach, Christy Size, can help her in that regard by maybe telling her more often, or better yet, how about drawing up a play that makes the best basketball play Caitlin Clark taking a shot? That might work. It just feels like Caitlin Clark is paddling upstream in so many different ways on a nightly basis and still puts up 24 points and 19 assists. So learning that sometimes you are the best option no matter what. And then also mixed in there last night, foul on Caitlin Clark, a turnover by Caitlin Clark. If there's improvement, an area that Caitlin Clark is going to improve, I promise you it's going to be the last 5 minutes of basketball games. That's where you're going to see it. I don't know that she's going to score way more than 24 points in a game or get more than 19 assists in a game. But you're going to see more production late in games. We're going to have Caitlin Clark game winners. We're going to have Caitlin Clark taking over the game in the final 5 minutes. It's always the last part. A lot of people come into any league and play well from the beginning of the game to like the last few minutes. And that's when things get nervy. That's when things are heightened. And in that way, Caitlin Clark, I think, is still a very young player in this game. But if she puts up 24 points and 19 assists and she can be better, that's a scary thought. For the rest of the league, not for us. I think most people are very pleased with the idea that Caitlin Clark is going to be even better as she moves along. But that's where the development is. That's what she has to learn. Indiana falls despite a historic, record-breaking performance. 19 assists last night for Caitlin Clark. Story number 3 today is that Bronny James has become a popular pick for Rookie of the Year. This is headline news today. Some people are putting down significant money on Bronny to be the Rookie of the Year. And what I would compare this to is the number of people throwing down money on the Colorado Buffaloes to win the national championship. You're getting a little swept up in the story. You want to be a part. That's what sports betting does for us. It kind of makes us a part of the story. It sets us up to look like a genius. Right? You keep those receipts. Look, I told you the Buffs would win the national championship. I told you Bronny would win the Rookie of the Year. Maybe I shouldn't do that because I do think there's maybe an infinitely better chance that the Colorado Buffaloes win the national championship than Bronny James wins NBA Rookie of the Year. A lot of people put significant money on Bronny being the number 1 overall pick. So the real story here is that people will do very stupid things with their money. They will. But the money flooding in, the bets flooding in after Bronny put up his best summer league performance, actually made a 3-pointer. I'm glad he's turning around. But none of this, it doesn't change the situation he's walking into, some of the resentment, that he will face, the jeers that he will face. And maybe the most unavoidable truth is that whether you thought he'd be drafted or not, he was taken 55th. Throw out all the Nikola Jokic's that you want. A lot of guys don't make it that are chosen in the second round, let alone late in the second round. 719-247-1313. Coming up next, I haven't yet talked about this. This Terrell Davis story, though, it is bizarre. And he went on Good Morning America to talk about it, and we'll talk about it next on Extra Sports 1300. So I've been doing sports news on our sister station 740 KVOR this week. And I reported on this story, not really reported. I have no information. I just, doing sports news. I mentioned this story the other day, but I haven't talked about it in this realm because I didn't know how big the story would get. But when people in my life that I don't talk sports with start bringing up, then I know that this is kind of a big deal. This Terrell Davis story, and if you're not aware of what happened, he was on a flight between Denver and Orange County, and a flight attendant had passed by after Terrell Davis's son asked for some ice, didn't hear him, kept going with the cart. So Terrell Davis reached behind and tapped him on the shoulder just to get his attention. And the flight attendant said, "Don't hit me." And then Terrell Davis, and he's on Good Morning America yesterday, recapping all of this. But essentially, he's like, that was weird, and then doesn't think anything of it. And then they land. Law enforcement gets onto the plane, puts him in handcuffs in front of everybody, right? Because if somebody's being arrested, you got to take them off before everyone else on the plane. So everyone on the plane sees Terrell Davis. Probably a few of them know who he is. I think that's part of it here. He's not just some dude. I mean, for some people, he might be just some dude, but I promise you, there are a few people on that flight. They're like, that's Terrell Davis being put in handcuffs. So they question him, and they ultimately figure out that the flight attendant, for whatever reason, was inaccurately accusing him of hitting him. But Terrell Davis took to social media over the weekend or on Monday, I think, to kind of talk about it. And then he went on Good Morning America. He was asked by Robin Roberts, essentially, what do you hope comes of this? Why are you on this show? What can be done when it comes to what Terrell Davis experienced on that flight? Here's Terrell Davis. When you're a high profile figure, and Terrell Davis maybe isn't as high profile as he used to, but he's going to know walking onto any flight he's on, at least a few people are going to recognize him. But more than that, to his point, he was with his family, and it doesn't matter if you're famous or not, being put in handcuffs in front of your kid would be unbelievably humiliating. So I understand completely why Terrell Davis is looking around and wanting some heads to roll here. I travel quite a bit, not as much as Terrell Davis does. I've never seen anybody get into an altercation with a flight attendant on any flight I've been in, maybe in my life. So I'm wondering how pervasive this problem is. And I'm not on every flight coming. I mean, think about the number of flights. Just because I haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I'm genuinely curious if this is a big issue because I've seen the other side of it, right? We see it all over social media, right? We see the flight attendants being accosted, right? I've seen on social media unruly passengers, right? Who remembers the bleep bleep is not real, right? How I think that was just supplanted a couple of weeks ago by Tua. Like that was viral for a while, and that was a passenger behaving badly. Any anything on social media, not to get too deep into the pitfalls of social media, but they make a lot of things in our society look more pervasive than they are. I'll just say that across the board, right? They are not just let's take it at the most surface value. There are not that many good-looking people in the world, right? These people have filters on. And if and if they're beautiful-looking people, they're going to be algorithms to death, and you're going to see them, and they're going to be, and it makes people feel like, oh, how can I compare? It's like, guess what? They're a small minority, but it's everything. I mean, social media makes a lot of things seem more prevalent on a negative side, more pervasive than is probably right. It makes you think more. I also think if you are a flight attendant, I don't think this flight attendant was maybe this flight attendant just was having a really crappy day and said, I'm gonna make this huge day a living hell. It's not right. I kind of feel like maybe that's because in Terrell Davis, he talked about it like the guy was very rude to begin with. I got to imagine if you were in an industry, it, like, let's just say flight attendant, and you see because in your social circles are probably other flight attendants, and you probably gravitate towards content on social media that has to do with flight attendant. And what you are inundated with is passengers who are putting their hands on flight attendants, who are yelling at flight attendants, who are being rude to flight attendants, and it probably makes you hypersensitive. And somebody taps you on the shoulder, even if it's just an innocent tap on the shoulder, you may be super sensitive to it. I'm not at all dismissing what the flight attendant did. What they did was to raise it to the level of forcing a man to be put in handcuffs. Like that's just egregious. It's terrible. There's no excuse for that. But I think incidents like this are kind of indicative of how hot the temperature is running in our culture right now. Not to go too far down the road, but we all know what happened over the weekend and some of that kind of stuff, right? Like everything is just everyone is so edgy, jumpy, and defensive. Not blaming all of it on social media, but it doesn't happen. So my guess is Terrell Davis probably sues United. I mean, that's got to be from a personal standpoint the end result because if he goes on Good Morning America yesterday and says they haven't apologized, I'm sure the first thing that happened after he got off the Good Morning America set was someone from United called him to apologize. Unfortunately, I don't think that'll be the end. I feel for him. That would be absolutely an image that even if you did nothing wrong, will not be erased from each other. So I don't blame him for taking to social media to going on Good Morning America. I can only imagine how embarrassed and everything he was about that whole thing and for him not to deserve it. 719 24 7 13 13. Back to wrap up the show after